Yes, Congressman Mike Gallagher about the address. You know, Mike, if it was any other week, I'd talk to you about how do you repair a relationship with a quarterback because the Browns have totally screwed up Baker Mayfield. It's a disaster. But more importantly, you're going to hear from a hero today. What do you expect to hear? How do you expect Congress will react?
Well, I will not take advantage of this opportunity to talk about the Baker Mayfield fiasco and the way in which he poured his soul out on Twitter last night. I will not talk about that, Hugh, because we have more important things at hand. I expect Zelensky to be very direct about what he needs right now. I understand that he's unlikely to convince people on the no-fly zone aspect, but there still remains much support we can give him, particularly as Russia escalates to attack supply lines near the Polish border. It becomes more important that we think creatively about how we can continue the flow of javelins, stingers, sniper rifles, things like that. I would also like to hear him address head on the MiG 29 fiasco. Perhaps it's too late to convince the Biden administration to change course, but I don't know. If he can lay out how his pilots are ready to use these aircraft and what a big difference they will make and why it's so essential in light of the fact that we're not going to impose a no-fly zone, perhaps we in Congress can put bipartisan pressure on the Biden administration. And I would say, regardless of how you feel about that decision, whether you were for or against it, the way the Biden administration did it was very counterproductive. It made us look weak, signaling. The Secretary of State signaled that we were in favor of it. Then the Secretary of Defense signaled the opposite. And then ultimately the president himself vetoed the decision. That was a disaster, Hugh. And that really undermined
Yeah, it was.
what little
It's a
credibility.
red line kind of moment that we'll look back on and say, oh gosh, they blew that. But this is Team Obama. I got to play for you. Last hour, Secretary of State Blinken went to his safe space on NPR. I like Steve Inskeep a lot. He's been a guest on this show. He writes good books. NPR. If they all were like Steve Inskeep, it wouldn't be a radical left-wing organization like it is. But in any event, Tony Blinken goes to talk to Steve Inskeep, and he says this, reverting to Davos speak to reputational damage in Africa. That's so Aspen Institute. That's so Munich Security Conference. That's so out of touch with the reality of a war in Ukraine. What do you say to that?
This is the reason we are in this crisis, because it's mirror imaging, it's strategic narcissism. It's them thinking that people like Xi Jinping and KGB thugs like Vladimir Putin play by the rules-based international order, which, along with history having sides, is a phrase we should retire, because history, of course, does not have sides. It's forged by human beings, usually with hard power. This isn't a model UN conference, okay? I don't understand why they continue to fall into this trap. And the Biden administration, it's the same naive belief that led the Biden administration to share intelligence with China in the naive hope that they could pry them away from Russia. But of course, they turned around and just shared that with the Russians. I don't see them abandoning their man in Moscow anytime soon. Indeed, the harder this gets for Putin, the more dependent he becomes on China as a market for energy sales, as well as a source of weapons and materiel and financial support. So this is the alliance of authoritarians that will be an enduring feature of the new Cold War.
Okay, I'm
And the
going to
Biden
help you out here,
administration,
Congressman. I'm going to help you out here. I was on Brett Baer's show on Monday night, and I used the phrase, the alliance of tyrants. It sounds better. Right, just use alliance of tyrants. It's got some alliterative use.
I like that. Well, trio of tyrants is a phrase I heard you say.
I
like
also
that a
use
lot.
that on Brett. You can steal that one, too.
I'm going to steal it. I will not give you credit. Here's what we can do.
Do we get a draft choice? We're going to need some draft choices because the Browns are about to give everything in the closet away for a guy with 22 allegations of assault against women. Don't get me started. Let's go back to Ukraine. I actually think the explanation for Blinken is very simple. Secretary Blinken, like Deputy Secretary Sherman, they spend all their time in Washington, D.C., all their time in this fake world. This world doesn't exist. It is model UN land, Mike Gallagher.
Well, there's another layer with Blinken, I think, where you have a former Secretary, John Kerry, working out of Foggy Bottom, pursuing this reckless climate change agenda, which is built on this premise of, well, we can't provoke China, we can't get tough because we need them to come to COP26 and sign meaningless statements. Hugh, I would say there are things we can do here, right? If the Chinese
Stop for a second. COP26 makes me laugh because that's exactly how they think. They got 30 people running around worried about COP26 as opposed to 26 clicks from Kyiv.
It's kind of, it reminds me of this report earlier this week that they brought a bunch of TikTok influencers to the White House to push the narrative that Putin is to blame. There's something about the left where it's all about the performance of the thing and the virtue signaling as opposed to the actual policy. It's crazy, Hugh. We need to be publishing any information we have about if China starts sending military equipment to Russia in the form of satellite images or equipment captured on the battlefield. We can also ban the export of any semiconductor equipment and design software of any kind to China as a sanction if they do this. So there are ways in which we can get tough on China, but I think we just need to recognize these regimes for what they are and for the de facto alliance that they are in against the West. They have launched this new Cold War against the West. It is upon us. Now we must fight back in order to win.
The trio of tyrants is Khamenei, Xi, and Putin, and they are all there is no international rules-based order because they don't believe in it. So if we believe in it and they don't believe in it, it doesn't exist. It's Harvey the Rabbit. Congressman, what is your understanding of what is actually going on? The Ukrainians are saying they're in counteroffensive mode this morning. Fog of war stuff. We have no idea, but maybe you've heard. Is there any hope that they might actually now advance through the holes in the lines that they've punched in the Russian columns?
I think it depends on what part of the country and what axis of advance we're talking about. I think part of the reason the Russians experienced so many difficulties is because they basically launched a three-front war. I think in the south is where we're seeing the most Russian progress and a steady consolidation of gains, but their advance on Kyiv and Kharkiv remains stalled. What we're not hearing, Hugh, and even what we're not hearing in sort of official briefings we're getting, is the capacity of the Ukrainian military, or as well as certain paramilitary or spontaneous insurgent forces, to continue to fight. They've been fighting bravely. The Russians clearly got punched in the gut, but we don't have any sense of how long the Ukrainians can continue this or whether they can exploit their advances. And I fear that our vision, of the battlefield that we're largely getting from Twitter is distorted because of the understandable pro-Ukrainian sentiment. And I fear, Hugh,
of course it is. Yeah.
Even if Vladimir Putin were to sue for peace today because he recognizes he can't continue this or occupy the entire country, think about what he'll already have gained, right? He's not going to give back the Donbass. There's going to be some promise from Zelensky or some other Ukrainian government official not to join NATO in the future. There's a variety of concessions that Putin can already get out of this process. And I fear that the lesson that the Chinese will derive is if you invade a country, even if you're only partially successful, all the West is going to do is sanction you. And that may be worth suffering the economic costs for the sake of gaining certain territory, even if it's not all of Taiwan. It could be some islands associated with Taiwan. And so we're in a very dangerous moment right now. All the more reason to continue to provide Zelensky with the support that he needs so he can continue to impose costs on the Russians, as well as avoid any other self-induced errors like the MiG-29 fiasco, which, again, I just think is undermined.
Congressman, I want to... It's a disaster. And keep talking. I wanted to give you a chance, though, for 2 minutes. I have been listening to Andrew Roberts' biography of Churchill before going to sleep, which makes it very hard to go to sleep because it's so good. And I'm in 1934 right now, and he runs around the world making speeches warning about Hitler, and nobody listens to him. Is there, at some point, will defense spending in the United States pick up with the reality of the alliance of tyrants, the trio of tyrants? Are we going to get there?
Well, we got an increase last week, Hugh, but that was after wasting 6 months of the fiscal year, and operating under a continuing resolution, which was incredibly costly. And I think the closer we get to the election, the harder it will be. And the Democrats remain wedded to this approach of prioritizing things other than hard power. Even within defense spending, you're seeing the beginnings of the DEI bureaucracy take root in the Pentagon and the elevation of issues such as climate change and identity politics, as opposed to a pure and relentless focus on warfighting. The military has two basic functions. It's to fight and win wars, or to prepare to fight and win wars. And anything that distracts from those two functions is wasted money in the military. And we're seeing progressive politics find its way into the Pentagon, and it has absolutely no place. It's divisive. It's contributing to the politicization of the entire force, and in particular to the general and flag officer corps. That's what worries me going forward. Beyond the top line, which we need to increase, it's the infiltration of some of the worst elements of identity politics into the military, which ultimately distracts from warfighting, and we're losing our warfighting edge as a result.
You're on Intel. You can't tell us a lot, but there is a covert division of the CIA that has typically done work in theaters like Ukraine. Do we have any reason to believe that the Biden CIA is as aggressive as Mike Pompeo's CIA?
No, without getting into specifics, I'll just say that the Trump administration, and particularly with the influence of former Secretary Mike Pompeo and former CIA Director Mike Pompeo, loosened the rules of engagement on a variety of fronts. In some cases, for example, in cyber warfare, that was in partnership with Congress. What we've seen in the Biden administration is a move in the opposite direction, more risk aversion, more cooks in the kitchen as far as who gets to approve certain operations. And so I'll have to leave it at that, Hugh. But in general, yes, you're right. There's more risk aversion. And as a result, we're slowing down our ability to operate, whether it's in cyber or in physical space.
We have to win these November election. Congressman Mike Gallagher, always a pleasure. Next week you can do Brown's therapy with me. I'm hoping that a quarterback can go home again because you managed to do it with Aaron Rodgers. Maybe the Browns can figure out how to repair the Baker Mayfield thing. They are engaged on the dumbest thing I've ever seen the Browns.